Miriam here, bringing you the next assembly in our series about God's numeracy. And the maths operation that we're looking at today is subtraction, or minus, or take away. But before I start, let me show you this. This is my Christmas present from Estelle last year, and I love it very much. I don't know if you can see, but I'm going to light it up. Let's just see. A little switch. Oh. Somebody's taken the battery out. I bet you anything you like, it's gone into the TV remote. But no worries, I have one here. Let's see if this makes a difference. Let me pop this battery. Hey, did you see it? I'll turn it off because it's a bit bright. Look, yay, it's in. Hey, that's great. I'm going to pop it back in the lantern and shut it up. I need to remember that because a lantern minus a battery equals no light. Anyway, I just thought that was a little bit about our theme today. The people of Israel had always been loved and cared for and protected by God. They were his people, and he always provided for them everything they ever needed. But the people kept looking at the other nations, countries around them, and they began grumbling about themselves. They've got a king. We haven't got a king. We want a king. Give us a king so we can be the same as everyone else. Oh dear. What a mess. God said to them, why do you want a king when you have me? A king will only take your sons away into the army. He will take your daughters away to work in his palaces. He will take the best of your crops and the best of your animals. And he will make you work harder than you ever thought possible. But still the people pleaded for a king. So God, in his love for them, chose a king, a man called Saul, who was taller and better looking than anyone else in the whole of Israel. Saul was exactly the kind of king that the people wanted. So he was crowned, and God loved Saul, and Saul loved God. Very quickly after this, Saul got right to work. An enemy had invaded, and Saul called men to join his army and fight with him. Hundreds of thousands of men came, and with God's help, they fought and won. Over and over again, when enemies came, with God's help, Saul and his army fought and won. King Saul became such a famous general throughout the land, but in all the countries around. But things began to change. It seemed like the more victories in battle Saul had, the more puffed up he became. He didn't need God. Why should he obey God's commands? He could win all these battles all by himself, couldn't he? He didn't need to check in with God before every battle. In fact, he even found other people to give him any advice. if he should ask for it. He didn't even feel the need to worship God anymore. Before one battle, God commanded Saul that when it was all over, he had to destroy everything. But instead, Saul took all the good stuff for himself. He didn't destroy it. He stole it. He failed God. And God began to regret that he had ever chosen Saul to be Israel's first king. And as Saul stopped loving and obeying God and leaving or subtracting God out of his life completely, he began to change. He developed a quick temper, nasty. He was very often depressed. People became afraid of him, never knowing what he might do next. Sadly, Saul's life came to an end during one great battle, and all of his 3 sons were killed with him that day as well, which meant that there was no one left in the whole of his family to become king after him. What a tragic end to Israel's first king. What a sad sum we have today. King Saul, that's his crown, minus God equals failure. But it didn't have to be like that, did it? I've been thinking about where Saul went wrong and what I might or would have done differently if I had been Saul. Perhaps we could take a moment now and ask ourselves what we would have done instead. I think this is something we need to keep on thinking about. And as I'm a Christian, I'm going to pray about it too, because that's what Christians do when they've got things to think about. Why don't you just sit quietly and reflect as I pray? And if it's your way, and if you feel you can, join in with me at the end when I say Amen. Dear God, today's story about King Saul made me feel very sad. Please show me how and what I need to learn from the mistakes he made when he subtracted you from his life. Amen. Hey, but you know, God still loved his people and would never leave them. And in fact, long before Saul died, God had already chosen Israel's next king. This time, it would be a man who would always love and obey God's commands and who would never, ever subtract God from his life. And his name was David. But he's for another assembly. Bye for now, and thank you so much for listening. See you soon.